Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Licensing and Registration Committee meeting on Wednesday, the 2nd of October. We will move to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I can report apologies for absence this evening from Councillor Skeels. There's no substitution for Councillor Skeels. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to item 2 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the last meeting, which can be found on pages 7 to 14. Can we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Davidson and Councillor Cousins. Thank you. We'll now move to item 3, which is declarations of interest. We'll just let Councillor Casey take his seat. Lovely. So move back to item 3, declarations of interest. Councillors are invited to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interest or non-registrable interest and the nature of it in relation to any item on the agenda. Do we have any?
Yes, I'd like to declare that I am a London taxi driver, have been for a number of years, but nothing to do with the tendering area.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. We'll now move to item 4, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38.
None received, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. So we now move to item 5 of the Miscellaneous Licensing Subcommittee, which can be found on pages 15 to 16, to receive and note. So do we have a mover and seconder? Yep, Councillor Anne Wiggins and Councillor Andrea Cousins. Thank you. On to item 6, which is the Premises Personal Licences Subcommittee, which can be found on pages 17 to 40. There's 4 of these. I'm happy to move them on block if we have a Councillor Smith and Councillor Cousins. Thank you. So we now move to the business tonight, which is item 7, report of the Assistant Director of Governance, A1 Licence and Enforcement Inspection Policy 2024 to 2028, which can be found on pages 41 to 56.
Thank you, Chair. The first report this evening is the Licensing Enforcement and Inspection Policy for 2024 to 2028. At the last meeting, committee agreed for this to go out for consultation. I can confirm that went out for a 5-week consultation, and that included going on the website, public notices displayed at the building sites, number of letters gone out as page 45. In addition to that, members of the team went out to a number of licensed premises and hand delivered some postcards encouraging the traders to voice their opinions. 2 members of the public responded to the consultation, and these can be found on pages 46. The recommendations are set out on page 41 for members. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have any questions from councillors on this at all?
It's clearly not a question, your attention has been drawn to page 46 and the consultation responses. So you'll see there that there are two such responses that were received back. The first one deals with resource allocation by the council, and the second one effectively talks about the balancing act in the terms of enforcement by, again, the council. council as licensing authority. I think it's fair to say that the intention of the licensing enforcement and inspection policy is to appropriately apply that balancing act of reasonable but necessary enforcement. And the resourcing is not something that comes within the policy, but is a matter that steps outside of that. But nevertheless, clearly, we will be reviewing our ability to deal with the level of enforcement, routine inspections, etc. And if that needs to be reviewed, it will be reviewed. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And I would like to just add, obviously, the second comment that came in on page 46. I am aware our licensing team do regularly visit and do work with, obviously, the shop owners and other establishments where there can be a little bit of an issue. So it's good to know that our team is out there and they are trying to deal with some of the issues that do come up. So if there's no questions, we will move to the recommendations, which can be found on page 41. Number 1, it's recommended the committee receive and considers the outcome of the public consultation on a revised draft licence and enforcement and inspection policy, and then determine whether to recommend the policy attached to this report to Cabinet for adoption, and 2, that on basis of 1 above is approved, officers be authorised to make minor amendments to the policy to ensure that it reflects operational positions of the council and legislative case law relevant to the policy. Do we have a... Yep. Councillor Anne Wiggins and Councillor Andrea Cousins. Lovely. All in favour? Yeah. That's everyone. Thanks. So we will now move to item 8 on the agenda, which again, report of the Assistant Director of Governance, A2 Sex Establishment Policy, which can be found on pages 57 to 80. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This one is regarding the sex establishment policy. Again, this one went out for a 5-week consultation following our last meeting. The consultation went out on the website and notices to a number of people, as well as the postcards again. We've had one member of public that sent a response that can be found on page 59 of the report. This is more around a sort of general comment for the policy, and the recommendations can be found on pages 57.
Lovely, thank you, Michael. Councillor Wiggins.
Yeah, can I just say, when I was looking on page 78, I just wondered there, when people are leaving, it says clear of customers and clear of staff. Are the performers part of that, or are they something different? It's just the fact that I wouldn't want them to get left behind.
Thank you, Chair. I think the addition of the words "and performers" after the word "staff" in item 24 would address the issue that you've raised, just in case that they are not actually staff of the venue, but otherwise hired in for the purposes.
Thank you. And I noticed that it says 26. I think this might have been spoken about earlier, that it says 26 there and then there's another 26 underneath layout of premises. I actually have to say I didn't notice that before.
Yes, Chairman, I think as has been pointed out, within 24, a new point needs to be drawn out, which is formatted incorrectly in the policy as submitted. That would become number 25, and therefore all the subsequent numbering would just move on by 1 as well. So that change will need to be made. I think we're also going to insert on the earlier page, on page 77, after 12, that the reference there to performances at the end of 12 should be a heading, and so that one will also be made on the basis that you approve this policy. It would be being approved with those changes being applied to the policy as approved.
Thank you. And just obviously an observation that we do at present just have one sex establishment in the district, which is a shop in Clacton, which you're probably all aware of, as there's only the one. Any more questions from anyone? No. So we'll move to the recommendations, which one, it is recommended that the committee receive and considers the outcome of the public consultation on a revised draft sex establishment policy, and then determine whether to recommend the policy attached to this report to Cabinet for adoption, and that on the basis one above is approved, officers be authorised to make minor amendments to the policy to ensure that it reflects operational positions of the council and legislative case law relevant to the policy. Do we have, Councillor Casey and Councillor Bill Davidson, all in favour? Yep. That's everybody.
Seconded by the Vice Chairman of the whole Council.
Thank you. Lovely. So we'll now move to item 9 on the agenda, which again, report of the Assistant Director of Governance, A3 Gambling Act 2005 policy, which can be found on pages 81 to 124. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This one is the Gambling Act 2005 policy, which has been out for a 5-week consultation. Again, this has gone out to a number of people, including the website, notice boards, and all the licence holders of under the gambling. We've had one licensing solicitor that's come back to the response, and that can be found on pages 119 to 124. On page 123, you've got some considerations that they've highlighted.
Chairman, we'll just go through those points that are being raised. I should say that Goschalk Solicitors are acting on behalf of the Betting and Gaming Council, and it's effectively that organisation which is submitting the response to this this review. Michael, I'm sure, would have also mentioned the fact that there is, or has been, a process commenced that would have likely resulted in revised guidance to local authorities in administering the Gambling Act responsibilities. We now have a new government, and where that will take us, I don't know. I can't say. It wouldn't surprise me that was picked up again by the new government at some point and taken forward. And that of itself would, I would suggest, trigger a further review of this policy. So you're being asked to approve this because statutorily you have to approve it within this time frame and have such a policy. So that's the right thing to do. But in doing so, it is wise that you're aware there could be an interim review of this policy should the new government take forward what was being proposed by way of revised guidance coming out to local authorities on their responsibilities under the Gambling Act. So I just draw that to your attention. So it never is a closed book once you approve these things. but even so, at this point in time, there could be that specific requirement for a revision to the policy to take into account revised guidance coming out from the Gambling Commission. Anything else you want to say? I think if we go to questions.
Any questions from the committee on this one? Councillor Casey.
I think it's well advertised in this country now where the gambling is concerned. It's a very serious issue across anything we can to stop the people getting into deeper debt with it. We should be doing something. And I think this government is one of the, on the agenda, they're actually going to do something about it. I hope they do. Okay.
Councillor Cousins.
Thank you. I'm really aware of the amount of advertisements that are on television at a certain time in the evening when people are generally having supper. And I think, is there anything that we could do as a statutory requirement for cutting back on adverts? Everybody knows where they can go to gamble, I'm quite sure of that. But it hits you 4 or 5 a night, maybe. On the hour, every time, especially sort of ITV Channel 4, something like that. And I do think it's almost obscene of the amount that goes on with be safe, play safe. But what is safe for some people isn't safe for other people. And I just wondered if there's anything that you know, are we allowed to put forward our views? As Councillor Casey was saying, it is quite a dangerous thing to get into now.
Quite clearly, I think those adverts that you're referring to, from my recollection of seeing them, is that they're relating to online gambling, and that falls outside of your remit and outside of the remit of this policy. Having said that, that doesn't stop you submitting something to Cabinet, who will also be considering this, and on to full council, to make the point that, you know, the authority could make representations on that issue to government, to the Gambling Commission, about the extent of advertising, about the extent to which online gambling is promoted, and that if somebody's got a problem with gambling addiction, will only be feeding that, however many times that they're talking to you in terms of trying to do it safely, when the funds stop type approach. But you could put forward that, but it would be aside from the actual policy itself, because the policy can't deal with the online gambling situation. That falls outside of your remit.
Any further questions from members?
Chairman, we've drawn your attention to pages 1 to 3 and 1 to 4, and there are effectively 3 points which Goschalks, on behalf of their clients, have put forward. One is to indicate that you shouldn't be aware of any deprivation that is in the area that a premises is located, that you shouldn't be considering staffing levels in premises and their ability therefore to control the environment in which people are coming in and participating in gambling. And I would say to you that quite clearly those comments are there. You could delete those requirements from your policy. Sitting here now, I would suggest to you that you could equally continue to have those policies. You will continue to consider each application on its merit, and therefore take account of all valid representations that are made on any individual application. And on that basis, I wouldn't see that there's an absolute requirement at this stage to delete them from your policy.
I think all members, looking at everybody's faces, would be happy to keep them all within the policy. I don't think, like you're saying, Keith, I don't think there's any reason to take them out. And we did say, obviously, with the new government and with policy, there might be some changes that come forward, and we would look at those as and when they, if and when they come in, and if there are any changes. So on today's note then, if there's no more questions, we'll move to the recommendations on page 81. It's recommended that the committee receive and considers the outcome of the public consultation on a revised Gambling Act 2005 policy, and then determine whether to recommend the policy attached to this report to Cabinet and full council for adoption. Do we have a mover for that? Yep, Councillor Cousins and Councillor Davidson. Everybody happy with that? Yep, it's everybody. Thank you. So we'll now move to item 10, which again, report of the Assistant Director of Governance, A4 pavement licensing policy, which can be found on pages 125 to 142. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report is regarding the pavement licensing policy. This went out for consultation over a 5-week period throughout the tendering area, including officers going round to those businesses that had tables and chairs or cafes and may require. During that consultation, we've had 5 members of public comment, 2 businesses, a town council and a responsible authority. Their responses can be found on pages 137 to 141. Going through the consultation, officers have amended in red throughout the policy following the consultation comments, and that they can be found throughout the policy, mainly on pages 132 and 136. Following that, the recommendation can be found on page 125. Thank you.
Yeah, Chairman, just going through page, particularly 141, which the earlier 3 pages or so are from Essex Highways, and as Michael was specifically referenced, you can see the amendments in red to the approaches by this council, or proposed approaches by this council in its pavement licensing policy, to pick up the recommendations from Essex County Council as to restrictions, conditions, expectations of licence holders when using the highway. But page 141 deals with those other representations that were received, and I think certainly the reference to the A-Board protocol, in the extent to which it applies to premises with pavement licences, so it can't apply to premises without pavement licences. So we shouldn't be using this to effectively enforce a requirement around the pavement notice protocol. It's just an adjunct to it for those that have these pavement licenses. So I just want to be very clear on that, where it references that this can only apply to those premises with pavement licenses and not to other ones. A number of those submissions that are set out on page 141 are, I would suggest, simply statements by those people that have responded. You know, there's the one that says perfect, there's the one that says no thank you, and there's the other one which is talking about the extent to which use of the outdoor areas can itself encourage a positive vibe when inside, if air conditioning isn't working, it wouldn't encourage that sort of positive view of the area. So there's a few statements in there, and therefore when you're considering the consultation responses, you can be aware of those statements, but they're not asking you particularly to do anything with them. The other ones, there's one in relation to a couple of retailers on Connaught Avenue, and it's fair to say that certainly under the previous legislative position, which is slightly different than the revised one that government has put through, but under that previous one, that one of the retailers that's referenced in there did not have a pavement licence, and there was nothing that this council could do to insist upon a pavement licence when they wanted to put tables and chairs outside of their venue. It's slightly different now, but nevertheless, I would argue, and you've just approved your enforcement policy, that if there's a heavy-handed approach to certain venues, then the customers of those venues will no doubt express dismay at the council about trying to stop somebody from putting some tables and chairs on the highway. So again, we will have to tread carefully with the enforcement of these powers in relation to premises that do operate tables and chairs outside of their venue if they don't already have a pavement licence. So I say that in relation to the comments that you've got. To the extent that it's identified out of that consultation that it would be valuable to amend the policy, those amendments have been taken forward, and Michael's referenced the areas, and they're set out in red. A few of the others are statements. Some of the others, when they're talking about an approach to enforcement, I've referenced the fact that actually they're dealing with a situation that predates this current legislation, and our powers were not there to do it. But even now that we have some increased powers to deal with pavement licences or unauthorised pavement tables and chairs, we will have to tread carefully in relation to that, because it would, I would suggest, be unwise to just go in heavy-handed and start removing those tables and chairs where there's an established clientele there. But hopefully we will be able to work with the venue that is providing that and assure them of the need for a pavement licence going forward.
Any questions from committee members? I'd just like to make an observation. I was in the district today and I did make use of a lovely cup of coffee outside a venue with table and chairs, and it was very pleasant to be outside. And I think across the district, obviously after the awful COVID pandemic, I think we could all see, the benefits of having some of these tables and chairs. Obviously there needs to be rules and regulations in place, but I think most venues have adjusted to it, and I think even the public that were possibly against venues having tables and chairs outside are a little bit more accepting to that now. Councillor Casey.
If there's an issue where there are tables and chairs outside, where does the responsibility lie? Technically speaking, they shouldn't really be there, should they? Say somebody falls over, who's responsible then? Us.
It would be the venue, irrespective of whether there's a pavement licence or not. If somebody's placed an item on the highway, then they're responsible for that and making sure that it is safe to do so. And I would hope that in that process that clarity was part of the process, and we certainly would be looking for them to provide that level of reassurance through the sort of things like licence, through insurances, etc., to cover themselves.
Any further questions? No. Anything further from? No. Right, no further questions, so we'll move to the recommendations, which are on page 125. It's recommended that the committee receive and considers the outcome of the public consultation on a draft pavement licensing policy, then determine whether to recommend the policy attached to this report to the Cabinet for adoption, and that on the basis 1 above is approved, officers be authorised to make minor amendments to the policy to ensure that it reflects operational positions of the Council and legislative case law relevant to the policy. Do we have a mover for this? Councillor Wiggins and Councillor Cousins. Is everybody in favour of those? Yeah. Anybody against? Councillor Casey. Any abstentions?
I only say that for the reasons I stated earlier. I think if you're having tables and chairs outside, I've seen it before, somebody falls over and they say, well, it's down to the pavement, something wrong with this. I think people, if they are have table and chairs outside, they should be made aware they're responsible for anything that happens in the outside area. We can't just divorce that area. Just an opinion.
Thank you. We will now move to item 11 on the agenda, which is the date of the next meeting.
Chair, it would there would be business to bring to you in January, if nothing else, licensing fees and charges proposed for 25-26, and therefore some suggested dates are at the back end of January, the 20th of January, which is a Monday, or the 27th of January, or potentially the 30th of January. So,
Is there a preference to members? I'm happy to put it out to...
Monday, Thursday.
Should we go for the first? Happy to go with the first one, Monday the 20th?
Yep.
Dust off our Christmas cobwebs. Lovely. Monday the 20th. Thank you, Keith. We will now move to item 12, which is the exclusion of press and public. The committee is asked to consider passing the following resolutions. A, that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of agenda items 13 on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 1 and part 1 of schedule 12A as amended of the Act. And B, that under regulation 14 of the Licensing Act 2003, hearings regulations 2005, the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of agenda item 14 on the grounds that the public interest in doing so outweighs the public interest in that part of the hearing taking place in public. Do we have a proposed seconder? Yeah. And Andrea Cousins. All those in favour? Yeah. Lovely.